The Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, May 28th is now called to order. Andrea, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 2:10 p.m. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Ms. Turner.
Present.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Andrea. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes. Donna Dabbs.
Good afternoon, council members.
Good afternoon.
My name is Donna Dabbs. I'm the co-founder of the Greater Cleveland Urban Film Foundation, and I serve as the executive director of the Greater Cleveland Urban Film Festival. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today in support of the replacement cigarette tax for arts and culture. GCUF is now entering its 13-year programming, and our growth would not be possible without the support of CAC funding. Our organization's budget has grown from $20,000 in 2012, our inaugural year, to currently over $400,000 for 2024. The Greater Cleveland Urban Film Festival is a prime example of how arts funding makes a difference. Each year, GCUF showcases the work of over 70 diverse filmmakers, provides educational opportunities for students and filmmakers, and we bring together people from all walks of life to celebrate and engage in the arts. This would not be possible without the funding and support we receive through the arts and culture funding. At GCUF, we make a concerted effort to hire minority-owned businesses for services wherever possible. We have one full-time staff person, myself, and we hire over 13 contractors throughout the year. By doing so, we not only enhance the festival experience, but also provide economic opportunities for local minority entrepreneurs. It's important we recognize the other benefits of arts and culture funding. Studies have shown that communities with strong cultural sectors see improvements in education, public health, and community cohesion. In conclusion, I urge you to support the replacement cigarette tax for arts and culture. The funding is crucial for the sustainability and growth of culture organizations like GCUF. It ensures that we can continue to provide valuable programming and contribute to the economic and social vitality of our community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Sonia Winner.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Sonia Winner. I'm the president and CEO of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. I hope all of you have been able to visit. And as you can see, we are under construction on Wade Oval, and we're doing something that is really very exciting for the community. So our mission has always been about health of the planet and health of individuals. And it so aligns with what is important here in Cuyahoga County. As I looked at your mission, vision, and values, economic growth and the growth of vitality of our citizens is just so important. And as I left the museum this morning, we had about 20 school buses of youngsters that were eager to learn. And sometimes when you're talking about the value of exposure to arts and culture, it really can't be measured by a number. But I can tell you a story of a young boy whose mother was a Cleveland Public School teacher. He came to the museum 40 years ago as an 8-year-old. He had never been to a museum. He went to the museum and fell in love with science. He grew up, he started to take chemistry, he started to take classes. He became the president of Kenyon University, and he is now the president of the American Natural History Museum, the first African-American male in the country to hold that position. So that's the magic that happens when kids are exposed to arts and culture. It is the magic that happens when individuals learn more about the world around them. The choices that we make, how we vote, what food we eat, how we raise our children. They're all based on the exposure that we get to institutions such as the Natural History Museum and this vital support that we have through the cigarette tax is just incredibly important when we're making decisions about where can we invest. Every day there is such a need in this county for all kids to be exposed to the arts and to science. And so as a CEO, I'm making those decisions about what kids can come. And if it were up to me, I would lower the barriers of all costs. And this is why we need that investment. We've had 45 years of balanced budgets at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. So we take that very seriously, any investment that is made. So I hope that you will continue to support us. We are a legacy institution, over 104 years in this community. The World War I veterans saw the beauty of the European museums. They believed in a great art museum, a great orchestra, and also that all children and all families should be exposed to natural history. Thank you so much.
Amy Cronauer.
Hello, council members, community members, and colleagues. I wanted to talk a bit today. My name is Amy Cronauer, and I'm with the Museum of Contemporary Art. I have been with the museum for 14 years. I have worked in the arts and culture sector for 29 since the beginning of my working years, and I've worked for 4 different organizations. They all receive COG Arts and Culture funding through the county. So first, I just wanted to share a little bit about what I have seen that it means to our sector, and then what I see that it means to the organization that I serve currently. So Cuyahoga County's nonprofit art and culture industry generated over $500 million in economic impact in 2023. When I'm reminded of this, it blows my mind because it really is on par with if you combined a few major corporations in our region and their economic impact. And the spending related to these organizations that I've worked for and that serve the arts essentially are on par with that, and I believe deserve the advocacy that they would receive if said companies were to leave the region. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like at the Museum of Contemporary Art. It's everything from educational impact. So we serve thousands of kids a year through school programs. We also have workshops. I think about one particular family who lives in apartment and housing right next door to MoCA, who comes to our workshops every single weekend and brings friends and family. That's just one example. But many, many dozens of schools every year connect this way, and it's especially important as we know that often public school funding is sometimes challenged. I believe it also drives just quality of life. I know that when I go out of town, one of the first things I always think about are what museums can I enjoy and what does it mean about the place that I'm visiting and our culture. And I think it's also important for social vibrancy in communities. We have everything from community conversations to, I think about the impact of the art itself, everything from beginner artists, people straight out of college or school, to elders who have received their first solo show ever in a museum. We have people, obviously a staff of around 30 who work and drive the impact of the community. Again, I think it's just when you think about a vibrant neighborhood, one of the first things that comes to my mind are institutions, schools, museums, et cetera, that create communities of choice and vibrancy. So I'm here to advocate for your continued support. I thank you for your support up until now. Thanks for your time.
Michael Gill.
Hi there, I'm Michael Gill. I'm Executive Director of Collective Arts Network, which is the nonprofit organization that publishes this magazine, Can Journal. Thanks for the opportunity to talk and for your support in the past, which you've been generous with. CAN is an interesting project in that it's a grassroots solution to a communication problem wherein a group of galleries about 13 years ago began to talk and decided to pitch in together and make their own media outlet to fill the hole that was left behind as other media had significantly cut back its art coverage. That cutback was going on at the same time as the arts were proliferating, in part due to support from the cigarette tax. And I've seen that in this publication because the number of organizations, we serve organizations, and the number of them has increased from about 28 to more than 90 at this point. And in that time, not only have they increased in number, but geographically they've spread around the city more. They've become much more diverse. And I think that this activity that you're supporting is really comes at a critical time in the city for a number of reasons, certainly economically, but also as we get to know each other better and build bridges and relationships across all the boundaries that we have. So thank you. I urge you to support continuing this support.
Megan Gargano, I'm sorry.
Hello, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Megan Gargano, Artistic Director of the Movement Project. We're a small nonprofit professional dance company located in Fairview Park. We've been serving Northeast Ohio for about 15 years now, and since 2018, we've received over $53,000 from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture due to the cigarette tax. And that really has contributed 100% towards paying artists. We hold a big festival every year called Cleveland Dance Fest. The last few years, we've had it located in the Collinwood neighborhood at Ariel LaSalle Theater. And without this type of funding, we wouldn't be able to produce this type of scale of festival. Each year, we have over 150 artists coming to attend, and we have anywhere between 400 to 600 patrons from all communities, specifically Cuyahoga County. It's super vital that we move forward with putting this to a vote in November. It's so important that we are investing within our artists, within our communities. Our artists are catalysts for change, and they are here to help fill the gaps where we are losing support in school or different programming that's happening within our communities. We're here to step in and find a way to make things better for our community members, and we just want to thank you for your continued support in the cigarette tax and to make that possible for artists and arts and culture here in Cuyahoga County. Thank you.
That concludes the public comment portion for today's meeting, and I also would like the record to reflect that council members Conwell and Simon are in attendance.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And if you would read our next item into the record.
Resolution 2024-0180, determining to submit to the electors the question of replacing the excise tax on the sale of cigarettes for the purpose of funding arts and cultural facilities and programs in the county.
All right. And I believe we have Kathy Berta to speak to this matter. Kathy?
Good afternoon, Council President, and to all council members. My name is Jill Paulson. I'm the Executive Director of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Lovely to see you all again. I'm here with my colleague, Jeremy Johnson from Assembly for the Arts.
Good afternoon, Jeremy Johnson, President and CEO of Assembly for the Arts and Assembly for Action.
We're going to take the next couple of minutes to provide some background information and answer any questions that you have about the materials before you today. I also, too, want to thank the Council President and Councilman Miller for co-sponsoring the resolution before you today, and that will move, hopefully, through the process. So we've got a slide deck that I think would be helpful, and then I do have some materials in front of you that provide detailed impact information by district of how Cuyahoga Arts and Culture funding is making a difference in every community in this county. So just a quick refresh for those of you who know us very well. I know some of you were knocking on doors before CAC even existed to make sure that we were on the ballot and to make sure that we were successful. Some of you are also new to this process, so I want to make sure we level set here. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public funder for arts and culture here in Cleveland. We fund nonprofits. That's how we do our work. Very simply, we receive cigarette tax dollars every month. We plan for how to distribute them over a period of 10 years, doing it in a way that can get the most money out into community. And then we distribute out nearly 300. This year, there's about 300 nonprofits receiving grants. And as you'll see by district breakdown, every community, even if there aren't as many nonprofits based in your district, I think might be surprised pleasantly that lots of entities based downtown, based in University Circle, based on the Near West Side, are performing and presenting in your districts, in your school districts, as well as also neighborhood festivals and the like. Before I turn it to Jeremy to share a little bit more about the big picture, about the impact of the arts and culture community in particular, I want to share the direct impact of CAC, right? So we've got the grants out the door to date. That's been about $250 million to over 485 nonprofits. If you have our annual report in front of you, you flip it over, you'll see everything ranging from small grassroots volunteer-led entities, the neighborhood festivals, the cultural events that are happening in every district. Then you'll find some mid-sized entities, probably some theaters, smaller museums that you might have frequented, and then the larger institutions that you also might be familiar with that do receive funding as well. So we think about the Science Center, the Rock Hall, the Art Museum, and the like, in addition to Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Also want to shout out Movement Project, CAN, and let's see, who did we just miss? Donna Dabbs, Miss Dabbs from GCUF. So you begin to see the full range. What I want to stress and what I know has come up during many of our board review and appointment processes, because as a reminder, CAC is not county government, but we are indebted to you all, right? As our own political subdivision from the state of Ohio. The legislators in Columbus help set our structure, but we do rely on all of you to appoint our board, and our board is of 5, and several members are here today. They come before you all in your process, and I think we've had a nice churn over time that you've been able to see folks in front of you and ask your questions. So we'll be able to revisit some of those, but I know in the past there's been questions about the equity, inclusion, and diversity of who we are funding, the source of our dollars, and making sure that we're getting out into community. So that's how we do our work. You'll note also that in addition to the millions of experiences that are happening, and each of our speakers in advance surprised me, but I shouldn't be surprised, we're bringing those stories to life. We're also wanting to make sure you recognize that what CAC funding does is allow organizations to operate, to hire people, and to allow them to present and perform and provide opportunities, nearly 50% of which are free to the public. So those are kind of the key elements that we want to make sure we talk with you today about the basics of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. We can come back to any other questions that you have, but I want to turn it to my colleague, Jeremy. We're 2 separate entities, right? We're the government entity that does the grant making. They're the nonprofit advocacy group that does that piece of the work. But I think what you can tell here today with us being at the stage together is we're in this together to make sure we can have another 10 years of successful funding.
Thank you. I want to also recognize the artists and arts organizations that are here representing to really speak to the power of the vote you have before you to allow Cuyahoga voters to once again support this powerful industry. You've already heard some of the statistics. It's a $500 million industry working just with the nonprofits. Assembly for the Arts, the organization I represent, is a bigger umbrella of nonprofits and other parts of the creative sector. Today we're talking about the nonprofits who now for 20 years have relied on these grants to make sure that our county is vibrant and the 8,000 jobs that it supports, more than 400 organizations from every part of our county, including all of your respective wards. This is a very serious vote because to move forward in November means that the financial losses that we've seen will not continue. So as we look at our slide screen that you have the deck in front of you, the current situation, if we get to the slide to the next one, it's all right, I keep moving, doesn't matter. The good news is that fewer people are smoking. And the bad news is, what that means is there have been fewer revenues for this gigantic arts and cultural sector. However, we have an opportunity with this vote to give us the breathing room to make sure that arts groups are supported for the next 10 years while we look at other alternatives. This is going to be so important, whether it's our anchor institutions, whether it's very small nonprofits. In fact, most of the groups that do receive the funds from these dollars are smaller, mid-sized nonprofits. If we keep it moving to the economic benefits. Thank you. A major contributor to the regional economy is provided by these funds, generating millions. I've already talked about the jobs. These are teachers, these are educators, these are folks that are employed by the nonprofit sector, attracting and retaining talent, of course, driving tourism. The work that we do is in partnership with other big sector groups that are driving the buildup of our county, the Chamber, Greater Cleveland Partnership, Destination Cleveland. We work hand in hand. Enhancing neighborhoods. I can't say enough about the neighborhoods across our county, from Chagrin Falls to Bay Village to our great city of Cleveland and every place in between. This will have an immediate and significant impact on the creative placemaking that nonprofits are providing. Again, I hope you enjoy these wonderful photographs from across the county. The numbers here were not provided just by Assembly, but from us doing work in partnership with American for the Arts. Really, they're the national creator of data and researcher of data across our country. And the last time they did this, right after the pandemic, showed this $500 million in economic activity. And that's right after the pandemic. It was even more before the pandemic. Just among the nonprofits, 8,637 jobs, and money returned to the government, $104 million returned to government coffers. Let's talk about educational benefits. We've heard Jill speak. You've heard some of our speakers talk about those beautiful yellow school buses filled with kids. We cannot discount the amount of work that the arts and culture sector plays to public safety, to our neighborhood development, to our quality of life. If it sounds like it's integrated, yes, it is. The work that you all do every day, looking at the big issues of our region, are directly connected to how arts and culture is part of those solutions. Providing safe and healthy options for young people, after-school programs and the like. These are critical parts of what makes our county a better place to be. And finally, the facts are this vote is to replace the existing tax with 3.5 cents per cigarette to help ensure an expanded funding. The funds from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and Jill can speak more to this, they are not only project funding, they are primarily general operating support. This is literally the lifeblood from the nonprofits that are working, where they can use the dollars where most needed, whether that's for jobs, whether that's for support for the employees. These are very important dollars. Quality of life I've spoken to. Education opportunities, where we work with school districts, we work with higher education, we work with those in after school and summer programs. All of our county residents do benefit from this. So we thank you for your time, and we're very much open to any questions you all may have for us.
All right, thank you for the presentation. And everyone's ready, so we'll start at this end. Councilman Kelly and then Councilwoman Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a quick question. You just said the cost would be 3.5 cents per cigarette?
Yes, sir.
And that's going from what, a pen?
From 1.5 cents per cigarette to
Okay,
3.5
so it's
cents
gonna go up
per
2
cigarette.
cents per cigarette if this tax passes, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Woman?
To the chair, to Jeremy, so who determines that amount that will be utilized from the sales tax that will come to?
That proposed amount was based on a couple of items, mainly getting us back to where we were, getting at least closer to back to where the over amount of funding was when this entity was created 20 years ago. So 3.5 cents gets us closer. When the entity was first created, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and the tax was first started, it was generating somewhere those first years about 20 million, 19 million. According to our conservative estimates, and these are just projections, we will get closer to that number. Do you want to speak to that?
But who makes that determination, the dollar amount? Is it the state legislator that determines?
That's a good question. We asked the state for permission to ask for an amount that's higher than it is now, and they did remove the cap. There was a cap on it previously under the current cigarette tax. That tax is now removed, so we can ask the voters for an amount exceeding that 1.5%. And based on the numbers that are more aligned with where we want to get to, 3.5 cents is the number.
And so that remaining, when it should pass, speaking of fruition here, when it passes, so you guys will get that portion, cigarette tax, and then the rest will go to the state, correct?
No, yeah, to be clear, because it gets a little confusing, especially as we see all the articles popping up, right, about other stadium taxes and other sin taxes. What CAC operates off of right now, full stop, is the 1.5 millage, and that what we're looking to through Jeremy's organization Assembly and the coalition of the organizations would be 3.5. That would ideally bring in about 160 million over 10 years. How did we get to that point? Jeremy and our consultants and other folks did a lot of research to provide recommendations. They came to my board in late April, made presentations that build off conversations they've had in the public for about the last 6 to 9 months. Indicating November 2024, millage 3.5. My board did vote on that to move it forward to you all for consideration because, of course, you are the body that allows us to put something on the ballot.
Okay, final question there. Other than what's before us, there will be no changes in how you both have been operating in the past, in terms of the grants and how you direct the funds to be, will all that remain the same?
I think it's important to distinguish between the role of the C3 and the C4 in the campaign and getting, us working to get something on the ballot, Jeremy's team, and that's why you'll see, in fact, why I'm not wearing the sticker, because, again, as a public official myself, I can't advocate in this place, but I can share with you the education components of it. So I'll leave the campaign and fundraising work to Jeremy and his team. From a CAC's perspective, it is the CAC board of 5 appointed by the county who makes the decisions every year on the grant making. Now, I can't speak for them, but I can indicate that there's always going to be, at least with the current board setup, a real commitment to ongoing operating flexible dollars for as many organizations as possible. But beyond that, we try to keep the campaign separate from the operations and grant making of the organization, other than to say we recognize that we're focused on nonprofits. We want to get the money out into community, and I do think we have a track record of trying to hit as many people with as many meaningful grants as possible.
I would just add, Councilwoman, the mission of Assembly is twofold: to expand the pie of resources for our arts and culture sector, to increase equity within that sector. And we believe this vote helps us to do both. And we will continue to work towards that bigger effort.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you add my name to it? Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I have a question about a concern that I've had about some of the tumult on the board that I've read about in the last 6 to 8 months. Obviously, that's a concern for me as a council member who's going to be funding that board and the institution. So there's been some changes, I understand, and want to hear from you about the confidence level you have in the board working together to advance the mission of the organization.
Yes. Yes, I can be direct and say we've had a difficult and passionate last couple of years. Our last 2 board meetings, which represent the current board leadership, Carolyn Eisenhart is our board president, Dan Blakemore from Cuyahoga Valley Nature Conservancy is our vice president. We have Leonard DeCosimo, who is our secretary. He's in the audience today, along with Michelle Scott Taylor, who is now our longest tenured board member, and she is the president of College Now. The 4 of them worked very well at our last couple of meetings, very professional, very efficient. Frankly, it's why we're here today. So I feel really confident and in our current leadership, and think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That was important to me. I'm going to support this and add my name.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, start out by saying, Jill and I have spent some time together in Leadership Cleveland, and she knows me to be a big supporter of the arts. It's an important part of our county. I truly believe that there would be support for the arts through other techniques and other methods. I know it was 10 years ago. You said you went back and read the record. I'm going to make this, I'm going to be a broken record because I truly believe that as I look out here at this audience, there's probably not a single cigarette smoker that took that microphone and talked about this, which is kind of ironic that you're encouraging people to do a habit which you don't even encourage your children or anybody else to do. So I have really mixed feelings about this. We had one speaker say for the health of the community and her comments, and you said for breathing room. Wow. Two terms that I don't think belong in a cigarette smoking request out there. Jeremy, what did you do to look at alternatives to this? It was 10 years ago, I was begging we should start looking for an alternative. And your comments to me before this was, well, this will give us the breathing room to start looking. Well, it's 10 years later, and we haven't even looked, it doesn't sound like. What did you do to look for an alternative for this, this technique?
Thank you for that question. I think that's a really important question because the health of our communities is paramount. A number of areas have been looked at, all kinds of taxes, rental taxes, property taxes, vaping taxes. One of the stories that is most prominent is when we looked at VCR taxes back 10 to 15 years ago. Can we tax VHS rentals? Thankfully, we didn't go that route. We wouldn't be standing here right now. We're continuing to do research and following what's happening both in Columbus, here and locally, nationally. Assembly for the Arts, the nonprofit, we're making it our business working with philanthropy and other partners to research what are the best practices across the country. So I agree with you. We need to find other ways. And we also understand that one of the research has shown that one of the best ways to tamp down smoking is to make it more expensive. So it is a double-edged sword. I will agree with you. We don't have the privilege of not asking the voters to do this if we want to stem the financial losses. So I agree with you. We have to look at other ways, and other states are doing different things with new kinds of taxes.
Like what?
For example, pull tabs is getting a lot of pull tabs are a way of gaming, how those are. I don't want to give the word out to too many folks because there's a lot of competition for these things, but I'm happy to talk with you and the other members of the council. But there are a number of things that we're looking at. We have to do the research very carefully because if that requires any legal changes, we want to make sure we're going to do it the right way. So I take your question very seriously. Thankfully, both public and private supporters for Assembly for the Arts believe that we need to look at the long haul, how this will work out in the long haul. But this vote is so critical to survival for right now.
10 years, in my opinion, is the long haul. We were begging to be looking at this 10 years ago, and it doesn't sound as though we got any closer. All we did is actually more than double the tax by what you're asking us to do here today for those who smoke cigarettes. And having lost a brother to Vietnam and cigarette smoking when he came back, this is the hardest vote I will take probably on county council because it pulls me both directions. I love the arts. I support. I've got a number of boards I serve on and participate in the arts, and it means a lot to me. I'm a believer that think that we could actually ask the voters, would you support the arts through some other method? And I think this community would support it. I really do, because it's so ingrained in every single thing we do here in this community, and it's one of our shining jewels that we have as our arts community. And I think you could get, I think you would find support in a different technique. So I just make that as a comment.
Through Through the chair, maybe
Sure.
just to add a little bit more onto that. I know maybe there could be at some point follow-up individual conversations or maybe through staff with council members who have more interest in learning about some of the other mechanisms that we did study over the last 10 years. And because some of those, I think we did put a lot of work into determining, what's the appetite for a property tax. A lot of folks will come up to us and say, Jill, Jeremy, have you thought about taxing pop, cans, soda? Well, yeah, there's a lot of things, or plastic bags, dare I ask, right? So I think there are a lot of things that we know. As a reminder, with being a political subdivision for CAC, we need to pay attention to what Columbus wants and what the elected officials across the state want. And so they have the say in determining, at least for our current structure, what we're able to do. So it did take us about 3 years to actually lift this cap to get where we are today, to be able to advocate. But hear you well, and I think maybe there's some way we could share more of the other options that we looked at that frankly just didn't play out. Real estate tax, ticket tax. There was an article this weekend in the paper, right, where you see a lot of the items that other communities are using for the arts, we've already tapped out on in Cuyahoga County.
Next was Councilman Miller. We'll keep coming down.
So, continuing with the line of questioning, Mr. President, to Jill or to Jeremy, do you think that 10 years from now, I think that 10 years from now that there's going to be so few people smoking that this is not going to provide a meaningful source of revenue, and that you won't have any choice but to come up with something different? Do you agree with that?
I totally agree and look forward to looking at some other alternatives in partnership with our public and private partners.
So, the initial levy was for 10 years, and the second one was for 10 years, and this one is proposed for 10 years. Is that length of time statutorily required, or is that just what was chosen?
It is what is in the statute currently.
As the maximum, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Since we agree that the source of revenue from this proposed tax is probably going to be at the highest level in the first year that it's passed and decline every year from there, are you going to pursue a strategy of not spending all the money in the first year and putting some money in reserve in the first few years so that you have a relatively flat funding base over the 10 years, or are you going to take whatever money you get each year and spend it?
Yes, that's a very thoughtful question, and I think one that has often confused people in the community. Yes, we need to take in the money, and then we need to save it to spend, to put it over the whole 10 years. That is what we've done in this last levy. It sometimes confuses folks when they look at our balance sheet and say, well, I see $3 million there. Why can't you give that out the door this day? We just heard from 4 amazing humans who could use that money right now. Well, point number one, as a public entity, we need the money in the bank to even enter into grant agreements. And I will tell you, we're going to have to make some adjustments even this next 12-month cycle to be able to make our commitments because the money is decreasing as projected. And number two, I think you have a very strong point, through the chair to Councilman Miller, that I think we need to think of this as a 10-year solution. So as we do our planning in community over 10 years, we need to think, does this community want as steady funding as possible over time? Or do we want to chip away and have decreases, which we've seen, understandably, causes some tension in community as people, want to be able to run their organizations and serve the residents. So I think it's a valid point. We've always had to spend, save a little money at the top to spend over through the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. Just to make it explicitly clear, this year we have about $11.5 million in grants. We estimate we'll bring in about $9 million. The only way we've been able to do that is by, saving money over time and planning for the future. So that's something we need to make sure that we think about and that CAC's board will need to consider, hopefully in these next couple of years.
Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Paulson, am I correct that the CAC funds only nonprofits and that individual artists are funded through a different mechanism? And could you explain how that works a little bit?
Sure. Through the chair to Councilman Miller. Yes, CAC in code was established to fund nonprofits. So as I said, we're funding currently about 300 this year. One of them is Assembly, and they do work directly with artists, and Jeremy could speak more to how they are currently running programs to fund artists. I think I also want to note, just as each of the speakers had mentioned, they're often using their operating and project support grants to directly fund artists, either stipends for festivals, I think, or where we're more often focused and think we need to increase is living wage jobs for families living in Cuyahoga County that pay health benefits and that are making sure that families can do their work. So yes, we fund nonprofits, but we have great partners not only in Assembly doing that core work themselves through a grant from CAC, and Jeremy can talk about some of the other fundraising work they're doing, but also many of the other organizations that we fund every day are paying artists.
So, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Johnson, can you give me some idea of how much money is being raised for the arts in Cuyahoga County on an annual basis from non-governmental sources that supplements what we're doing here?
I don't have that number on the top of my head, and that number varies depending on how we define the sector. We include at Assembly 3 parts of the sector, so nonprofits, for-profit cultural businesses, think of the Happy Dog or the Beachland Ballroom or your favorite art studio, gallery, and also individual artists, which you mentioned. Again, generating $500 million it's what's going through nonprofits right now. The money raised, that's a fair question too, and we are working in partnership. Part of our study that we want to do is we look at how do we find that alternative through the chair that Councilman Schwan asked. How are we looking at what are the alternatives? We are surveying how money is being raised by nonprofits and those other sectors to support the industry. So that's a fair question. Happy to get that number back to you.
Thank you. And Mr. President, final question, but maybe a fairly lengthy one. My question is to describe what progress has been made in improving diversity in the arts and culture in Cuyahoga County, and what things do you think still need to be done, and where you think improvements still need to be made, and how you intend to make those improvements? Thank you.
That's a question I love because it really, one of the whole reasons Assembly was created was to really be addressing the questions of where are we with equity in Cuyahoga County. Already, we pointed out how big an industry are for arts and culture in terms of dollars and cents, but how big are we with how we are elevating disinvested communities? I can tell you for Assembly, and with our support from CAC, we've been able to do more. For example, we've invested in red line communities in the city of Cleveland and entering suburbs for arts place, creative placemaking there. We've invested in cohorts of artists and businesses and nonprofits that are primarily diverse organizations, BIPOC, and others. We've done that with support from a number of sources, private and public, including CAC. We will continue to do that. There are dozens and dozens of groups that are now part of our 3-year effort to invest in diverse communities. We've got to do more. I literally just served on a panel this past week at the Cleveland Orchestra looking at diversity in classical music. This is an effort that is really close to our heart, and we see all of you as partners in this effort.
Thank you.
Through the chair to Councilman Miller, I would also add from CAC's perspective, obviously you recognize as a government entity yourself, we can't make grants based on race, but what we do is think very clearly about who we're reaching and who we're not reaching. So we have kind of a two-pronged strategy. One, how do we work with the predominantly white institutions that have historically been those organizations in Cleveland that folks recognize? How do we make sure they're more welcoming? How do we make sure that they have on the gallery walls and on the stages programming that reflects the full community? And I will say we've got some great champions in the room here today, and those others that you will recognize that have really taken that work on. So I do want to call that piece out of the work. Then obviously there's the additional work of increasing support to Black and Brown-led institutions. You can see in our annual report from 2016 to 2022, we had a 222% increase in funding to BIPOC-led and serving organizations. And I think we've begun to see that sometimes like a 3-time tripling in the number of grants. Now, that doesn't always mean where the dollars are going, but I think that shows intentional change and focus. That tends to be about expanding who we fund, not diminishing to others. So just to be clear, but it's been a focus of CACs, and I think a place where we've had some success by the numbers.
Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jill, it's nice to see you. And Mr. CEO, it's nice seeing you. You mentioned 20 years ago, and I just like to throw the Tom Shorgle out.
Yeah.
Because it all started when I'm on city council. He came out with his vision, gave me a little penciled artwork that he gave me. And without him, it would have never started. So a little shout out to my friend. I don't know what he's doing, but he's good. I have one question and then a couple comments. Just when you say as many nonprofits you try to support, but it's always through a very competitive, fair, transparent process to make your decisions and awards. Is that an accurate statement through the chair?
Through the chair to Councilman Sweeney. Yes, we do follow the model that's pretty typical of public agencies across the country, be they local like CAC or on the national level. We do grant panels. So everyone is adjudicated in public. I think that's an important thing to say, right? Everything's now mostly virtual, so our panels occur online. You can tune in. They also are written and everything is posted. I would say, though, we do trust the groups we work with. We trust but verify, right? They know what they're doing. They do amazing work, and so what we try to do as much as possible is streamline the process, and especially if you've been in the fold for a while and have demonstrated for a couple of years that you do have the ability to distribute public dollars. We really do trust organizations and check in with them every 6 months. But yes, we do follow a public panel process, and groups do reports to account on where their funding goes.
Thank you. And through the chair, that wasn't a question. I was just wanting to make a statement in public kind of thing. That was, and just on you, Jill, because you've been doing this for a long time, and I want to just commend you. You should get combat pay for some of the stuff you went through. But the way you did it, you hand yourself always classy, and you took it and you just wanted to drive and lead this organization. So kudos to you. And this group that you have behind you, every one of them could have came up through the chair and shined. So it's our job now. Passing it's not a big deal. You can add my name to it and all that stuff, but getting it across the finish line with the vote of the people. So we're getting a congratulation putting on, and that's our statutory obligation. But after this gets done today or throughout the process, getting it past the finish line in a positive way is something that I'm going to focus on with you. And just want to, when I started with 20 years ago, I wasn't all into the arts, didn't really have much appreciation for it. But over the time, the slow learner here really appreciates the impact it has on all different parts of society. And what a beautiful way to help grow. And it's, you know, spiritual and fulfillment. So that's my diatribe. So, Mr. President, thank you, and let me know how I can help, and please add my name.
Councilman Gallagher.
Where does Cuyahoga County rate as far as tax dollars to the arts in Ohio with other counties?
I think right now, so as a reminder, we used to be one of the last in the country. Before CAC, there were 0 public dollars coming from city, we should say dedicated dollars. Clearly, money flows through the county at times. We were one of the lowest ranking big cities in the country.
Where are we at now?
We can get you the follow-up information. In fact, I'm sure some of our colleagues back there have it at hand, but it was we were an anomaly to not have city, county, or other public funding for the arts. Now that we are here, it's still substantial, but I will tell you, we used to lead with, we're one of the biggest local public funders of arts and culture in the nation. Well, we're doing good work. We're doing the most we can, but I will say Columbus is moving fast. We can get you those numbers. They have really seen some growth in public funding. They also are able to do some other fundraising that, again, we choose not to do so that we can allow the nonprofits that we support to fundraise.
You don't know if you're number 1, 2, or 3?
Compared to the other
I,
communities?
I can say in terms of national ranking of cities, Cleveland is in the top 20 of Arts Vibrant. That does measure how much is invested in the arts by, we're number 14 in the top 20. We're not in the top 10, however. I can also share through the chair to Councilman Gallagher, thanks to the leadership of this group, we've been able to influence, for example, the city of Cleveland. Prior to 2 years ago, there was not significant funding from the city of Cleveland. We've seen that turn around significantly. So we've come a long way, so we still have a long way to go. So ranking, we're number 14 according to the Arts Vibrant study done by SMU Arts Data. They're a national research firm. They do studies every few years. We want to be higher, and that does measure how much funding, how much government impact, how much private impact. There's a very complicated formula around that. Happy to share that with you.
I'm just talking about tax dollars.
Oh, just tax dollars.
I know you have a lot of funding, but just tax dollars.
If you're through the chair to Councilman Gallagher, why don't we get that back to you, because I'm assuming you're thinking us, Cincinnati, Columbus, and if the top 3 or everyone else, yep, we'll pull them. I will say CAC is the only organization in the state that functions as it does, that receives these tax dollars. So we still are an amazing source, even at $10 million of grant making per year. That is still notable and enviable for many of, especially the rural communities. But why don't we follow up and get you that information of other counties' public funding for the arts?
Okay. I mean, because even at 13 million, which obviously it's going down, will continue to go down, and you're hearing the concerns of some of my friends up here. And I do know, my connection in Columbus, I know you guys have been very active trying to figure out where else to go, and you've been told no. My concern, obviously, is that we are considered, if not the poorest city, but a poor county collectively because of Cleveland and the struggles that we have. Our sextennial's coming out. There's going to be some major hand grenades in the mailboxes of our taxpayers in the next 60 days or so. So timing is everything in life. And I come from, and I told my friends up here, and we were looking and struggling with the how to pay for things in this county. I come from a pretty good city that has said no to their schools twice in a row now. You're asking to up a tax on that's going to affect, quite honestly, some of our poorest people in this county. So on the backs of the poorest people, we're going to have a campaign saying, "Oh, it doesn't hurt you," without identifying them. I find that a little bit disingenuous. And again, knowing that what you've done as far as trying to fill the gap, as I think that you have found in Columbus and you'll find here, the gaps are filled. We're in the highest tax county in the state of Ohio, one of the highest tax counties in the nation, quite honestly. We have the greatest need for our poorest of the poor, and we struggle daily with that. So I don't know who you hired to tell you to do this. I think it was a huge error at this time to be asking for this increase. I think, quite honestly, you'll probably get it because it's not going to hurt those that are voting for the most part, and it's going to leave those that are needing the most in the dust, and that's a great concern to me. So I'll certainly support putting it on the ballot, but I will not support this in my communities. It's up to you guys to campaign for that. I don't think there's anybody debating the want and the need for arts and participation in the arts, especially with our youngest citizens. I myself love outside artists. That's all I collect is outside artists. And most notably, most all outside artists are very, very poor people until they become popular and they become multimillionaires. But I would say that if we're talking equity, start looking on the outside, because I could use a few more in my district. And again, I know the dollars are stretched, and I struggle. I see your struggle. But again, I'll vote to put it on the ballot. But as Mr. Schron said, you've got to find something else, because this is unsustainable. If anything's unsustainable, this is, because in our lifetimes, cigarette smoking, tobacco use is going to be in the rearview mirror, and that's a good thing. But to force people not to smoke because of a tax for somebody else, it's very difficult geometry for me to get through. So best of luck.
Well, Jill, oh, you want to go right ahead?
Just,
Did you forget about me down
I thought
here?
people over there.
That's right, I'm sorry. The council vice president goes next.
Okay, down here at this end of the podium, one of my colleagues and I, Simon and I, were discussing the one segment of smoking that seems to be growing, that is cannabis consumption. We have never been in the cannabis business in the state of Ohio prior to last year, and now we are. Why isn't that under consideration? Is it the state that took it off the table? Did you lobby on behalf of it? All the kinds of questions that come up that you can think I will ask, just go ahead and answer me.
Very good question. Cannabis, as we all know, is legalized, but not fully executed in Columbus. We're keeping a very close eye on the legislation that will accompany the execution of that. Jill and I are in conversation on a regular basis with our fellow arts councils around the state on this issue. The verdict is still out through the chair to Councilperson Stevens, but we're keeping a close eye on it through both through our fellow arts councils and through our government relations people in Columbus.
Remember, the voters keep saying yes. The legislature is much more conservative than the members of the voting body in Ohio. So every time they say no, a new member of the public begins to lobby people. It takes them a year or two to get the signatures, but they just keep coming back. So you've got a pool of voters, a pool of consumers who keep doing this. We see all the money going to Michigan, to name another state. And we haven't figured out how to use this. So are you just watching it, or are you lobbying on behalf of us getting a share of that to take care of the arts?
Well, you're doing both, and at our expense. To watch and to be in the halls of Columbus takes expense and Assembly for Action. Our 501c4 is on the job, making sure that we know what's going on there every day and every week.
Because it seems to be even more expensive to consume cannabis than it is regular cigarettes. Therefore, 3.5 cents would be on a larger pool of consumption. And so I just don't want to see us pass something up if we could be at the table sooner rather than later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just a quickie, I know you're always looking for alternatives. This building is full of artwork that we bought. We promised that we were going to recycle and sell it and buy new so we could stimulate the art community. There's a profit that's going to be made, we hope, and nothing will be sold below what we paid for it. There's money in this building waiting to be used for the arts and culture so we could recycle and get fresh art from new artists that are out there waiting to put their creative skills to work. And so I'll just only point that out to you because I know we just did an inventory over at the county executive's office, and so we now have a complete logging of what we paid, when it was bought, and things about there. It's been sitting on the shelf for 15 years. Thanks.
Simon.
Just a quick follow-up to the concerns of my colleagues about the cost to the people who do smoke and how we're capitalizing on that. And I just want to add there was a comment made that if the cost goes up for cigarettes, then people smoking will go down. I don't think that's true because it's an addiction. When people are addicted, they'll pay anything. We know that with other forms of drugs and alcohol. So is it possible for the colleagues who have friends at the state to ask for some funding to do some education around this smoking campaign? If you feel, passionate about that. I know at the beginning with the tobacco settlement, there was a lot of money put aside for that purpose. I don't know where that's at. It's probably gone. But I'm just suggesting that that might be an avenue to address the concerns you have about the smoking and addiction, and, that might be a place to go to get funding, because they're not giving us funding for the arts that we need. It defines who we are in Cuyahoga County. I mean, people come here because of the arts, and if that goes away, I really, sports and arts, which is really a funny dichotomy, but I'm just putting that out there. I heard two concerns about the addiction, and maybe they can get some money to help a campaign up here to accompany what we're doing for the arts and culture. He's in the elevator.
I'm not as close to some of those folks down
Okay.
in Columbus as some people might think. I'm probably their greatest critic. I do know these folks have knocked on doors, shall we say, and have turned over all the rocks where dollars may be or may soon be. I would suggest that those in Columbus probably have an idea on where they want those tax dollars to go.
For cannabis?
Yeah.
I have a feeling too, but
I think
we've got to
that's-
talk about it.
I think that's a long line, too.
Council, we're going to have a hard stop at about 3:50 for this item and the two following items. So we will work on that time as we do that. But now the floor is for Councilman.
I'll be very brief. My colleague, Councilman Simon, I think all of us are going to work with what we have to be able to help advance the cause of education. And there is still a window for the cannabis. It's not all locked up just yet. And our advocacy could have an impact, and sometime at the State House, things added at the last minute become part of the statute. So thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Okay, so
Previous question? I'd like to vote.
I'm sure you did, but I'm going to have a word too.
Oh, okay, we forgot. But there's a hard stop, Council President. I think.
Yeah, oh, my goodness.
That was
Hard to
funny.
keep the troops in line, my goodness. But Jill and Jeremy, I just want to say that I've looked back over the last 10 years, and I've looked back fondly over all we've done. There were challenges that we addressed. Again, as you've already expressed, and your predecessor, Karen Gold Mills, strong advocate, and as was always said by Councilman Sweeney, your predecessor, Tom Shorgle, working with them, it was a great pleasure for me to work with them. At that time, there was minimal minority participation or reception of any of these dollars, and as my colleague has said, they were bearing a brunt of generating the dollars, the minority community and lower income communities were bearing the brunt. And we worked to address those things. And in a way that the larger institutions in this community, our Cleveland Museum of Art and Cleveland Orchestra, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all of these world-class institutions, and I'm leaving many of them out already, but we were able to provide funding for them, as well as the working class institutions and nonprofits and individuals that many are here in this room as well. And Tom was a strong advocate, and being able to work through that as we brought minority participation and reception of these dollars 10 years ago. And we found a formula and a way where everyone was a part. So I was proud of that work that happened and that you all continue, and your presence here today, and your board that has experienced diversity. I'm proud of all that I've seen from this institution, this CAC over the years, and I'm happy to support today. And I look forward to continuing these things. It's not like you arrive and it ends. It's something you could constantly work work at it, and I'm proud of the work that you all are doing and the efforts being made by all parties involved. So again, with that, you have my support as well. Doesn't need comment. Just let you know that I support. And as my colleagues are demanding, it's time to vote, and it's time to vote. All right. So with that having said, I will entertain a motion. Is there?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded.
Sweeney, then Simon.
All right, moved by Councilwoman Stevens, seconded by
The
Sweeney.
3 S's just take care of it.
All right, and all in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it.
Through the chair, would you please add my name?
And let's add Councilwoman Mary Turner's name.
I'll withdraw my second and give it to Sonny.
No, don't, please.
do
We'll
it.
save it for another time.
Save it for another
The
day.
next one.
Sweeney gets it. All right.
Sweeney got it.
All right.
Good job.
All right, we're going to move on. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 2024-0004, repealing and replacing Chapter 703 of the Cuyahoga County Code, establishing a Justice Center Capital Projects Fund within the general fund, and directing the deposit of specified sales and use tax proceeds therein.
All right. Now we have a proposed substitute. Is that correct? We have a handful of substitutes, if I'm correct. Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Would you like to
hi,
speak
this
to that?
Greg Huth with the Law Department. We've got a couple of minor edits we'd like to see in this ordinance to deal with a couple of issues that came up in our discussions with bond counsel, because we really need all this legislation related to the correction center financing to kind of flow as one big project and all describe the same purposes, for example. That's why in section 703.02, we added the language regarding acquiring land and interest in land. I think you know that we use some of this money already to acquire the property out in Garfield Heights. And then if by chance the financing structure for, say, the courthouse is similar to the one for this building, that's why we've got the interests in land in that added language. And then down in 703.03, we added the word directly, simply because sometimes the phrase relating to can be a little fuzzy. So we wanted to make clear that it was only relating to the kind of financing that we're talking about for these projects.
Okay. So these are technical changes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So those are minor. Is there a motion to accept the technical changes?
So moved.
As proposed?
Second.
It's properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion on these proposed substitutes? If not, all those in favor of accepting the proposed substitute say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Now, at this time, is there any further proposed substitute?
Go ahead, Jack.
Who would like to?
Don't we have to get this one on the record first?
So we have the technical support.
Right.
Unless the sponsor has some comments that he'd like to make, we can move into any proposed substitute that you would like to consider.
Okay. Well, then, I have got a proposed amendment to the ordinance that's been suggested that for 2024-004, and that is to that the funds be used for purposes to which we told the taxpayers we'd be using them for, which is the creation of a justice department and a center for the Corrections Institute. It's not for any other purposes, and so I've got that as an amendment to the proposed substitute.
Mr. Chairman, this is Greg. Can I ask a quick question? Just want to be clear that this is a proposed substitute amending the one we just approved? Because this would add language to the version that you just approved, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Yours has been accepted.
Right.
And now, in addition to that, there is one that could potentially be incorporated into
Thanks.
yours.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I'm just trying to figure this out. We have one piece of legislation that was just amended. And now we re-amended that one to add this to it?
So there were technical changes, minor, nothing substantive, no substantive changes. And that's what we just had and all agreed to and voted on. Now, there's a
We're just
a
adding
proposal.
on, we're just adding on to the original technical, it's all the same
Yeah.
piece of legislation.
What is now not technical, it is a proposed amendment, a substitute by your colleague, Councilman Strawn, that would be more substantive in its change.
And who was the first, from the administration?
This
Well,
is not-
well, specifically, if I may, the law department.
It just says technical, okay.
Yes.
I have a clear
Yes.
understanding now.
Okay. This does not change anything that we just passed. This is just an.
Adding to it, okay.
This is additional language to be incorporated into the legislation. So I move that we attach this amendment as indicated, that is before everybody. And if we could have that read into the record.
I'll second, yes. I didn't know if there was discussion going on here yet, or.
I thought it had to be read, but that's okay.
So we have a first and a second. We do have a first and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Councilman Miller.
may I ask a few questions of the
Please
law
do.
department?
Okay, I just want to make sure clarity is there, that everybody knows what we're actually talking about, because I haven't heard it being read into the record, to be honest, unless I missed it. I referred to it.
Ordinance 2024-0004, repealing and replacing Chapter 703 of the County Code, establishing a Justice Center Capital Projects Fund within the General Fund, and directing the deposit of specified sales and use tax proceeds therein.
It was the amendment that I would suggested that we actually have in.
I can read the amendment if you'd like.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael King, council staff. Just to clarify, so the amendment before you today, I can read the specific language. As the law director indicated, this would be the amendment before you doesn't incorporate the technical changes that were in the proposed substitute, but based on Councilman Tron's response as to the intent of this language, the proposed amendment, I think if council were to vote on this, would include that additional language, but also make the additional modification. So I will take a shot at reading the language as it would be amended if adopted. So basically would amend section 703.02 of the ordinance to read, funds in the Justice Center Capital Projects Fund shall be used solely for the purpose of acquiring, including acquiring land and interest in land. That was added as part of the proposed substitute. Constructing, renovating, furnishing, and equipping, and then removing the words and otherwise improving, a county correction center and courthouse, and then additional language reading, provided, however, that funds shall not be used for routine maintenance. I'm happy to take any questions about the technicalities of that, if there are any.
Just on the comments?
Right ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has nothing to do with the operations? That got taken out of the thought process during the discussions?
As my understanding from the amendment sponsor's intent, and I'd let him speak for himself, this would not impact the operational question.
Through the chair, just because for the last couple of days, I've been talking about it. This is the first time I'm seeing this in its written form, so I might ask some questions. So it's just, read it one more time so I can hear it.
Sure. Funds in the Justice Center Capital Projects Fund shall be used solely for the purposes of acquiring, including acquiring land and interest in land, constructing, renovating, furnishing, and equipping a county correction center and courthouse, provided, however, that funds shall not be used for routine maintenance.
And the definition of renovating means way into the future? So this fund will be able to be used not just for the construction, not for just furnishing it, but be in place to keep it going up to a speed that whatever council agrees to renovate it with.
Yeah, through the chair, theoretically, I believe that would be encompassed, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President?
No. Oh, well, go ahead. You feel free, Councilman.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarity. So who, in the proposed substitute that we voted on already, who added this language, including acquiring land and interest in land? Was it the sponsor, or was it on behalf of the sponsor, or on the administration side?
Yeah, apologies for the confusion. Yep.
Yeah.
It came through from the law department after discussions with our bond counsel. Because as I said, we're trying to make sure all of this, I mean, the financing this thing's going to be kind of complicated, right? So we got to be sure that it flows as we move forward. And since we already have actually acquired land, we wanted to include that here. And if we, again, set up a funding structure for the courthouse, for example, similar to the funding structure we have for this building where we're actually a tenant and just have an interest in this land, then we wanted to include that as well.
And was that in any previous, was this type of language needed when we built the Hilton Hotel? Was that kind of, or was that our land already?
Well, to the councilwoman, the land was ours.
Okay.
But it actually is a similar structure. We have what's called a COP structure, a certificate of participation structure over there, where we're leasing it technically from the Port Authority.
So this, I mean, I see your point that you're saying that this is just to be inclusive of the land that we acquired already, but what would it do for if we, in the future, if we decided to acquire some land for the rest of this correctional campus? Would it?
The councilman or the chairman of the council, and I think it's more in the context of if we need to acquire land for a courthouse. We wanted to be clear that acquiring in this context included that.
President?
So again, what we had was really a technical amendment that Lord Greg Huth brought forward.
Yes.
Nothing substantive change. There's not a substantive change.
Correct.
It's just technical.
Okay.
And that's totally separate from what Councilman Schron is bringing forward, where we can entertain if we all follow what he's just brought forward to us.
Okay.
But before you go, let me allow the councilman to have the floor. Did you have a question?
I have
And then
a couple of
Councilman
questions.
Schron after
Well, I
that.
wanted to at least tell you the background before
Yeah.
and allow the questions to come as a result of
So-
why I'm proposing this.
I'll defer to the amendment sponsor and then ask my question.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're okay, did you say you're?
He's deferring to you to hear
Referring to
your,
you to get
Thank
further
you.
clarity.
Thank you. The purpose for why I've suggested this and brought forth this amendment is that what we took to everyone when we made the announcement that we're going to pass this and put this forth was we were building, if you go back and look at the record, we all agreed that we were building a building. The building was going to be used for the campus concept, and eventually it would also be used for a justice center. Just like when you and I would go out and maybe perhaps buy a home, we'd go out and get a mortgage, we'd borrow the money, it would be used for building that building. It wouldn't be used to put a new roof on the building 20 years from now. It wouldn't be used to put a new hot water heater in 10 years from now. It would not be used for those purposes. Those are maintenance purposes to which they are separate from a capital acquisition. When we go out and look to the folks who are going to buy these bonds, we're going to present this to the bond buyer and say, you are using this as security to build this building and this center, not so you could provide maintenance and service and other things in the way of payroll or support. That is outside of what we, as a body, voted on when we passed this. And so all this is doing is saying, let's put some fence, some guardrails around what this can be used for. We said it's for capital. We said it's to build a building. We said it's to build a center. We did not say it would be used for perhaps operational expenses or salaries or anything of that nature 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years from in the future. We said it's for these two projects. And so all we've done by putting this language around it is it puts some constraints on the county executive to make sure that these funds are used for the intended purpose to which we voted on.
Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have a few questions to the Law Department. And the first one is that at the last hearing on this subject, the question came up as to whether if we decided to lease facilities rather than construct, whether that would be allowable. And my question is whether either in its current form or whether it's in its proposed amended form, whether we would be allowed to use this Justice Center Capital Fund for leasing of facilities.
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, that's actually part of the purpose of the language we added in 703.02 when we say interests in land. That would give us the ability to hold an interest in the real property, including a leasehold interest.
Okay, so that would solve that problem.
Yes.
Okay. The second question is whether the concept of justice facilities would be broad enough or not to include a diversion center that was built as a separate facility, not as part of the jail.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that one. I'd like to have some time to take a look at it.
Okay. The third question is regarding the county's general fund reserve requirement. And the idea of a general fund reserve is that you have unrestricted funds that can be used if an emergency comes up that you got to deal with. And so my opinion would be that the money in the Justice Center Capital Projects Fund could not be included as part of the general fund reserve because it's money for which the expenditure is restricted, either under the current version or the proposed amended version. And my question is whether or not you agree with that assessment.
Mr. Chairman, that is something I've actually been looking at over the last few days. I don't really see language in this ordinance that specifically restricts the fund. It calls it a fund within the general fund. So I think there's an argument there that you could include it within that 25% requirement. And in fact, the last sentence of the last section says something about if this fund is ever repealed, or if this code section's repealed, or this, what does it say here? If this fund's ever terminated, then this money goes to the other unrestricted, or be returned to unrestricted sales and use funds. So that can also be read as saying that this is just another unrestricted fund within the general fund. So I think there's an argument there, but if council has some other intent, then I think we might want to tweak the language here.
It's just hard for me to understand how a fund that can only be used for certain things as defined in the proposed legislation could also be considered part of the county's reserves for use in an emergency.
And that, again, that's the purpose of the reserve policy that's we set aside in under 706, I think it is, of the code. But again, these are all things that are within council's control.
So, Mr. Chairman, to the Law Director, final question. What do you think is the significance of removing the language that said, or otherwise improving. What kind of things would we be prevented from using this money for because that language was removed?
Ask a question. Which language? The amended? Okay.
Mr. President, perhaps our council has an answer about improvements, including but not limited to painting, plastering, things like that. If there's a hole in the wall, I'm assuming that's an improvement that we need to keep in. But if the law director is not up to speed with what that may be, I think if I can, ask Mike King to come and explain that.
Thank you, Councilman Miller and Councilman Simon, through the chair. Michael King, once again. The terminology "otherwise improving" I think was originally included as intended as a catch-all, right? If there were things that didn't fall into one of the other buckets of the acceptable uses, this could encompass some other things, and I think in conversation with the amendment sponsor on this, the intent clearly of this amendment was to remove things that could qualify as routine maintenance. And while there are gray areas here and there, I mean, just for point of clarity, capital improvements are typically those things that have a useful life of more than a single year. So you're talking about amortizing costs over multiple years. Whereas maintenance is something that it's an ongoing cost you have to incur to maintain existing facilities or systems. And so the words "otherwise improving" theoretically could encompass things, including maintenance of capital project systems that the amendment sponsor thought might be too broad, but I would defer to him in terms of the specific intent there. But I believe that's the thought process behind removing otherwise improving from the amendment.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon.
Okay, Councilman Miller covered the questions I had about leasing. The question, though, I'm stumped on is I'm still not clear from the law director how this could still be part of our reserve, used as our reserve fund. Is it just by default that we have money sitting in this fund and therefore it constitutes part of our reserve because it's restricted?
Madam Chairman, to the councilman, as I said, I think there's an argument to be made
Is that the argument, though?
that, yes,
That I just made,
that 25%, because it's part of the general fund, and the reserve is within the general fund, it's all general fund.
So just will qualify as dollars to allow us to have the percentage we need to have a reserve fund.
It could be used that way.
It could be used that way. I don't think I guess the amendment author has talked about the reason for this. My concern about improvements is I don't think it's that broad. I mean, if there's like a hole in the wall from, something happens there, we're supposed to now take that out of the general fund instead of using it to correct problems at the facility. Is that the intent of the sponsor?
The intent is that routine maintenance of an item.
Not routine maintenance. You took out otherwise improving.
Yeah, I took out otherwise improving because it strikes me as being a very generic language that allows you to things like, is payroll increase otherwise improving the operation of this facility?
Okay.
Is adding something of a, for example, the healthcare that we're doing inside there through Metro General Hospital, is that otherwise improving? And it doesn't belong, in my opinion, into the capital costs when we go out to ask bondholders to buy these bonds to do things that are not related to the building project and the construction project, which they're buying their security in that when they buy those bonds.
Okay.
Otherwise improving for generic, for example, fixing a hole in the wall, that, in my opinion, would not be something that a bondholder would be buying those bonds with the anticipation that you're going out.
Well, it's security, right? It's security. I thought you said this structure will be security for the bondholders.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in here for a second? It would be important to note that 70303 says what goes into this fund is net of debt service. So whatever the bondholders are expecting, this is after that.
Yeah, yes, but the language will be in the bond that they purchase, will it not?
This language?
Language of what they're using the intended purpose for our bond proceeds that we're
Certainly,
using for the
because-
jail and the Justice Center.
Wait. So the question, Jack Sharon said that this is security for the bondholder, and now you're saying
It's
the
language.
bondholders wouldn't want this used for this, and we just heard it's not. But I just wanted to ask the question and let everybody remember the juvenile court facility, soon after they got in, the sprinklers were found to be defectively placed because the juveniles were able to get to them and cause flooding. We had to come together and find money to correct that because it was somewhat of an emergency. And I don't want to restrict this language enough where if something were to go awry at the new facility, that our hands are tied and we have to go into the general fund. So that's, I think when we start taking language out like this, it's too restrictive and it's going to hamper us to function as a county government when our core mission is in large part to have a jail functioning. So that's one concern. And I just want to remind the sponsor, we all didn't agree that there should be a campus in a building and at Garfield. We didn't all agree on that. I certainly was one who did not agree. And I'm going to bring up right now that the cost of this being in Garfield, 71 acres, is going to be extraordinary, including but not limited to the sheriffs going back and forth, the overtime involved with this, all of the other liabilities that are come with a jail that's as far away as those who need it and use it. It's going to come to pass that this is going to create cost way beyond these capital funds. And I want to talk about a satellite jail we're going to need now at the courthouse, where we're going to have to house those inmates for the day with food, with a place to stay. We're going to have to, that's going to cost money, and want to make sure through our council that this will cover that satellite jail.
Mr. Chairman.
So let's do this. All of our colleagues are going to speak. I'm going to give you the order that everyone will speak.
Let me just get an answer about the satellite jail, and then I'll defer. The Vice President has a lot to say about what I'm talking about.
I will give out the order of speakers next.
Can I just have an answer to the jail?
Thank you, Councilwoman Simon. Council President, I would of course defer to our law director on the ultimate answer to that question, but based on the language as I understand it is that it would allow, it speaks to a correctional facility, correction center and courthouse. It doesn't refer to the corrections facility. So I think there's some wiggle room there.
So next, we're going to have Councilwoman Conwell, then Councilman Kelly, Councilwoman Stevens, and then Councilman Gallagher in that order.
And throw Sweeney down there if you don't mind.
Okay.
Almost forgot my question. So it was, through the chair, was back to, and this probably goes to the law department. So, and my question is based on this, the amendment, the new amendment that's in front of us for routine maintenance. How does the administration, or how did the administration plan to pay for maintenance costs in the future of the new site? Because there was a reason that you kept routine or maintenance in there.
Councilman, I just want to point out that the law department administration didn't write this.
Well, I know you didn't write the amendment.
We didn't write the ordinance. So I think you need to go to the author of the ordinance to get the answer to that question.
I get that, but still, it was implied, it had to be implied somewhere in the original ordinance that there was maintenance that was included.
Well, as far as I know, we pay for maintenance however we can, but that's not a law question. That's either a finance question or an administration question or an author question.
Department of Public Works, if they're going to run, and the Sheriff's Department, of how they take care of routine maintenance generally over any jail, not just the new site.
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Stevens, do you have insight into the answer? Before we get to your question and your turn.
Let's talk about standard operations and financing of properties. Right now, today, the jail has a line item where they use it in the same exact way as intended, because there hasn't been bond financing on the jail in a long time. When you currently do bond financing, and I'm just closing out some right now on a much smaller level than this, your letter from your syndicator or bond issuer spells out definitions for every use of every fund. So if there's something we as a council don't want to see in the definitions of what's acceptable, we need to spell it out now and in our legislation. Otherwise, it shows up in there as allowable. And so that's why this conversation is so incredibly important. What do we want to allow the administration, the executives team to be able to spend the money on? They, of course, have things they want to do with the funds. It's also important to realize that in the first 5 years after something is built, you have a guarantee or a warranty on most items. And your bond folks are not looking for you to take bond proceeds to correct something unless there was litigation because there was a bad design and you need to correct it ASAP because water's coming out of the walls. And so you're going to take those proceeds and correct it, and then they're going to do there will be some form of litigation. So the reality is it's appropriate for us to discuss how we want to use the money. If it's operational in nature, it should not be part of the bond funds. If it is maintenance, there is a very narrow area. General maintenance is what we should have as part of our cash flow to cover the general kinds of things that need to be maintained. Because that's the reason you go to a new facility. Your old facility is antiquated, it doesn't function correctly, and now it's time to move to something new that's safer, that's better. Moving to new and safer and better with a bond issuance will have everything spelled out, how we should use the proceeds. Why it becomes important is if wonderfully, we spend less money than we thought we would, then if we're done with everything, the last sections of this legislation talk about, I believe it's when we're terminated with the project, we're finished with the project. Then, of course, if we spent less than we thought we would, I think most of us would be happy to do something else. But first, we've got to do this. We've got to build the jail, and we've got to build some type of justice center. Is that the focus of what we're doing here today? We need to focus on that more than anything else, because hopefully the stream of cash that we're using to pay for maintenance today will be less than the stream of cash needed to pay for maintenance at a new jail facility. For example, if we're going to use solar as one of the items that we're building in, we'll use less for electricity. If we're going to do other sustainable kinds of design, are we going to use water more functionally? So we use less water. We'll recycle some of the water that comes from certain pipes versus other pipes that will go out for disposal into the water and sewer system. All these things are in design factor, and we hope that there will be savings for our operational and maintenance needs by building a better long-term facility where we know that these materials will last longer than the ones we used the last time. Some are more energy sustainable, some are more efficient in how they can be used. That's what we're depending on the team of architects and engineers and people who've built jails before us, and we'll learn from other folks' mistakes. We hope they're making limited mistakes in Columbus so we can learn from theirs in Franklin County. So that's why this language is important, so that we have given guidance to finish this project first before we do anything else.
All right, thank you, Council. At this time, Councilman Kelly.
Question, just answering Sean, my question didn't go to, I'm in agreement with you, but I still want to know whether they're putting them on record. Or I thought somebody from Department of Public Works would be here to talk about their maintenance plan. Even though we want to take it out of these funds, the building eventually will need maintenance. And in order for us not to get to where we are today with lack of maintenance, I just wanted to put them on the record at the beginning of the conversation. How have they thought about that plan and how they would eventually maintain the new jail or correctional facility?
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Well, I don't see any of their people, do you?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. This goes to law again. When there was a question about the 25% or whatever, in 70302, the funds for this capital project fund shall be used solely for the purposes listed. Wouldn't that cover the fact that there's no vagueness there? It's solely for.
Again, what I'm saying is there are arguments that could go either way. I don't have, maybe I should be clear. I don't have a clear answer on this question because of the fact that it's part of the general fund and the 25% reserve is part of the general fund. This is all in the general fund. I think this is something that deserves a little bit more research on our part.
It's still Stevens, Gallagher, and Sweeney, still in that order.
I'm finished.
Okay, at this time, Councilman Gallagher?
Ms. Stevens pretty much summed up what I was talking about. I think we're getting a little far afield here and seeing enemies behind every tree. The reality is, this was from day one, 6.5 years ago now, for a jail and a justice center. It's as simple and direct as that. What we are spending probably in the last 6.5 years in maintenance and elevators and roofs and floods that we've had in the Justice Center and problems we've had in the jail and locks that we'd have to jerry-rig because the parts don't exist anymore. That's all a cost that we pay every day, every week, every month, every year. And we continue to pay that. And that, to me, is good money going after bad. In a new facility, as Ms. Stevens was saying, you're probably going to get 10 to 15 good years. That's it. The way I look at it, that's 10 to 15 good years that we're not replacing elevators, redoing air conditioning and heating, taking care of any other items that those horrible facilities are dealing with on a daily matter. So, and when you are bonding, the bond people are going to want to know exactly what you're borrowing this money for. And if you go outside the four corners of that, you're not going to sell those bonds if you start putting all kinds of ancillary things in there. So the simpler, I think, the better. I think this is, I understand the concerns, but I think Cheryl said it perfectly, is that we're spending money now and we don't even blink an eye. And it just frustrates me to no end. Those are dollars we're not going to spend when the new facilities are up and running. Eventually, they'll catch up to us, but the council at that time and the administration at that time will have, as we had the previous discussion, at least a 10-year walk-up to get ready for those costs as they start coming, as far as yearly and monthly and maybe even daily maintenance, painting, things like that. So we're going to have brand new facilities that aren't going to need the dollars that we're pumping into them right now. And again, when you go out, if you're going to go out to a bond market and say, oh, we're not going to guardrail this, we're going to open it up, I don't know who's going to buy them. And I don't know a bonding agency that will accept that. I think the simpler we are with this, the better we are with this. And I think what Cheryl said is absolutely right on.
In fact, recently, they required a reserve on me on one of my deals, and they made me take the reserve money, the $250,000 would be $250 million for us, and put it in a reserve out of my cash flow. So if we are too unrestricted in trying to go to the bond market, they'll either up our rate, reduce our term, or not give us what we want. And they're changing things in the bond market all the time. In less than a 2-year period, I had them make reserve requirements from cash that they, so this is going to go against our reserves. It's not going to be just added into our reserves. They're going to make us do additional restrictions. And I don't want to see the county have to do additionally restricted funds. They could, if they ask us to put $250 million to the side, what will we do?
Thank you, Council Vice
Mr.
President.
President,
Let
on
me
this
say this,
point-
I am in support of this legislation and in support of Councilman Schron's amendment as well. We need to stay focused on a jail and a court. The dollars that are going to be needed, every bit of these dollars are going to be needed in these early years, and I don't want us to lose focus on that fundamental point of having sufficient dollars for the jail and the court. I believe in many of the other things people have talked about, but that jail and the court is critical. So with that being said, I know we still have,
Mr. President.
in this order, Councilman Schron, then Councilman Miller, and then Councilman Gallagher.
My one is to reflect on Ms. Simon and Mr. Miller and actually myself. I don't understand how the law director can put this into our reserves at the same time, because think about it, if this becomes almost a self-standing portion of our reserves, we spend it down, we built the building, and we've spent our other reserves through other secondary purposes because we're relying on this to be our support for, this has to be a standalone. This is a standalone building. We're going to build the thing. We're going to drain all the proceeds from that. And how, I just don't have no idea how we can be using this as a reserve. This fund ultimately will be dried up as we build this building for that purpose.
Mr. President, to colleague Sharon, I think what if I can speak for the law director and how I interpreted it was just not necessarily, it could be viewed as part of the reserve. That's what I think is being said, because that money's being held in the general fund, even though it has guardrails. So if we're looking at a reserve, that money's sitting there as part of the general fund, and it will diminish, obviously, as you build, and it will go down. But it's just a perception of how it's viewed.
I think that's a fair interpretation. This is not defined in this ordinance as a restricted fund.
Based on the construction timeline, this
But
is
if
going
you
to
want
be
it to
built
be
in
a
4 or 5
restricted
years.
fund, you can say
It will
that.
be gone.
You know.
So,
I mean, the
if you use
likelihood
this as your reserves and it's gone, where's your reserves coming from? If you
We're not relying on, I'm sorry, we're not relying on this fund to accommodate our reserve. It's just going to be viewed as part of it. And if it goes down, then our reserve perception goes down. But it's not being used to capitalize our reserve.
Right.
Or relied upon.
Right.
Okay. All right, at this time, again now, Councilman Sweeney, Councilman Miller, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to my colleague, Jack, you made a statement that during the debate about extending it, as one of the people that voted for it, that the money's going to be used for building the jail. And I fully agree with that. We all talked about it, but it didn't say, I never said only. I never said for sure, pontificated, it talked about it. So I want to be very specific from my perspective and my vote. I voted for the extension for the reason of creating dollars to create the jail, the Justice Center, or the courts, but not limited to just solely that. It was intended 17 years ago as a 25% or a quarter sales tax that went in place, and I'm comfortable continuing that setup that was done before. So that's just my comments or response to your comments earlier, just for clarification, as one of the people that voted for it.
And that's the reason we're trying to fix your vote, to be honest, right now, to put it around the jail and Justice Center. You might have had a different opinion. I believe it needs to be put around the jail and Justice Center.
Mr. Chairman,
we're going to be maybe
fix my mistake is kind of irritating. No disrespect, Jack, at all.
Sorry.
But
your vote,
I am very specific on, I voted for it, and you made the statement that it is on the record, check this, go ahead. Nowhere in it you're going to see anybody except Mr. Kelly saying it should go very specifically to the jail. Just a point of clarification from my perspective. Getting to the questions now, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. How long have you known about this amendment?
I'm sorry, Mr. President, to the council member, which amendment are you talking about?
The one we're
Councilmember
talking-
Schwanz?
Yeah, the one we're talking about very specifically today during.
Just
the
learned
debate.
about it in this session this afternoon.
Okay, so let me answer your.
I am in, it's my floor, if you don't mind. Can I?
What was yours, Councilman?
Thank you. Administration, would you please come to the podium? Because I don't really like you there. It's your choice to tell us what your opinion of this amendment is. Because it's important, because it is two branches of governments here. And what we decide affects how you govern or how you execute as administration.
So, Mr. President, to the council member, I would say I couldn't make a definitive decision on that based on just having heard what I've heard and not having had a chance to run the traps and understand what this language might mean.
So through the chair to the administration, you want more time to think about it? You're opposed to it? You're for it? Because I have the style of at least understanding what the administration wants to do and then make an informed decision as a true partner. So do you have an answer to that?
Mr. Chair, to the council member, I would be reluctant to give an answer to that right now. I think in the last.
Telling me through the chair that you don't have an opinion on if you're for it or against it.
I'm saying that, I stated the administration's original position at this last council committee, the whole meeting, and I would want to take a look at the language of this legislation and understand what it meant, what the consequences of it were.
And thank you. And we're talking through the chair. I'll be done very quickly. That was last committee. This is a whole new piece of legislation, so I would respect the administration's wishes to, and I'd like to understand a little bit more. But I just want to make a very specific point on the very first one and hope I didn't get too elevated, but also on the administration's opinion.
Understood, Councilman. Councilman Miller and then Councilman Kelly.
So, Mr. President, to my colleagues, I just want to remind everybody that this is not the bond legislation. We're talking about whether this legislation is too restrictive or not restrictive enough, as if it's going to affect our ability to issue bonds. At the time when we issue bonds, there will be legislation that's very specific as to what exactly the bond money can be used for and how the sales tax is pledged and how it's assured that it's going to be repaid. Am I correct, Mr. President, to the law director about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just to Mr. Janis. When this legislation first came up, I had a meeting with you to let you know it was coming ahead of time, right? The only difference between this supplement and the original is just taking out a word or adding a sentence or whatever to it. There's not a huge difference. Still is to restrict the money for the use for the jail and for the courts. No different than what we first talked about when we had that meeting, which I wanted to do ahead of time, add respect to the administration. And since that point, you asked if maybe we could have a meeting prior to today so that we could discuss the legislation to see if there's any wiggle room in it. And I haven't heard anything. Nobody asked to talk to me. Nobody set up a meeting. So, again, this is what I'm sticking to right here. Thank you.
We coming back to this end?
Okay.
Do we, I hear what the deputy administrator has said. Is it appropriate to give them more time to respond to this? Because, Jack?
I will go on the record that I spoke personally with the county executive a week and a half ago on this exact language that I have written here. He said he disagrees because he wants unfettered use of these funds to be able to use in broader base. I said, we're building a jail, we're building a justice center, we should keep it simple. And I agree with Mr. Miller, there will be a time when the bond language, but the reason for writing it now this way is to actually start to put some four corners around that bond language. It's not to wait till September or August when we're all busy rushing around. I spoke personally on the phone with the county executive. He asked me, do I support Mr. Kelly's concept? I said yes, but I think it needs to have clarity that maintenance should not be included. So to say that the county executive is not 100% aware of that telephone conversation, I know that I had that conversation with him, and if you call him and ask him, he will confirm it.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Burns.
Thank you, Council President. Unfortunately, I'm at a disadvantage since I wasn't a member when these thorough discussions went on. And I do appreciate Councilman Kelly's time and effort to bring me up to speed, providing me with a copy of his comments that were made at that time. But I am somewhat confused by some comments that were made today. Councilman Schron, it seems that there was a definitive decision made during the discussions to extend the sales tax. If there was a definitive discussion and there was a majority, why wasn't it addressed at that time? I don't need an explanation right now, but just something to think about. I wonder why it wasn't addressed at that time. Going forward, I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I definitely would, having had some experience of sitting on both sides as a council member and as a former mayor as an executive, I think there's a vast room for dialogue, discussion, conversation, and debate on Councilman Kelly's ordinance. And one other thing that I'd like you to think about is that I don't see any need to rush this through. If this is to kick in December 1st of 2027, at the end of this year, there's going to be 2 new council members. There's going to be someone in my place, and there's going to be someone in Cheryl's place. I think these individuals, if there's going to be a vote on this to restrict the budget to the degree that you want to restrict it to, I think these 2 members definitely need conversation and dialogue at that time. Those are just some of my thoughts.
Any other comments?
President.
Who is next?
I'm going to try to go
Councilman
next.
Simon and Councilwoman.
Yeah, thank you so much, colleague Byrne. I think you're right that there wasn't any substantive conversation when this passed 6-5. It was a last-minute rush vote to get it done by the end of the year, and there was never any real thoughtful dialogue about how it would and should be used, the sales tax extension. I try to put it to the voters. I try to put guardrails. That was all rejected because of the timing. Timing's everything, as Councilman Gallagher said previously. So now we're trying to push this, and I'm not saying I oppose guardrails, but I think we need greater discussion. One of my concerns is emergency repairs. You know, we blow out a whole part of this jail and we can't do it. I mean, we've got to have real dialogue about this, and you were a mayor, you know. And what is it going to do to us as a council when we have a general fund that I believe is going to be decimated by this jail in Garfield and all the accompanying expenses and the satellite jail that we're going to have? And we better be ready for that as a council. And I don't want to rush this through until we understand thoroughly, as best we can, what's involved with moving a jail to Garfield.
Okay, Council, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to hold this item because there's still so much, there are still questions to be answered and comments to be made. But we're going to hold it and bring it back to our next committee of the whole. Got a comment? All right, quick comment.
I'll be real quick. Mr. Miller is correct. We're not going after the bonds right now, but I will caution everybody up here. I wish I had started out, and I wish the law director would have stopped us. We're making a record. And everything that we're saying is going to be used for us or against us. And at this point in time, I think we're in trouble because the bond market's going to look at us like we're a bunch of crazies up here, having a whole bunch of money and not knowing what to do with it when we know exactly what we need to do with it. So I'd caution my colleagues, we are making a record that will be reviewed both visually and in writing.
Conwell, do you want to make a final comment as well?
May I make a comment?
Sure, you can.
Okay. And I don't know that my concerns will be addressed in this legislation, but I'm hearing everything that's been said, and since our colleague Gallagher was so poignant about the fact that we're making a record, I just want to go on record to say that I have some deep concerns about the non-structural things. I have concerns about the people that we are going to be incarcerating, and that we need to commit to some type of plan to address these concerns. We've heard from constituents on many occasions about making sure that we are providing adequate reentry services, dollars for reentry, that we are providing dollars for behavioral health services, as well as other vocational job training, et cetera. So as we continue to discuss this, I know that we have a very specific goal to make sure that we get a jail and that we get a courthouse built. But I just want to put it back in front of all of our colleagues that these are people in these jails, and many of them look like me. And so that's where my concern is, not the legacy of the building, but what we put in the building.
Appreciate those comments, Councilwoman. I share them. There is no daylight between you and me on those matters. And I have long advocated for our Health and Human Service dollars to really address many of those concerns. All right. Looks like we're not going to end. Huh? Go ahead. All right.
Just one last thing.
Go right ahead, Councilwoman.
I don't disagree with those points the colleague made about this is more than a jail. That's why we probably should have thought long and hard about the cost to moving it to Garfield. 71 acres. And maybe this money now that's going to be sucked up could have been used for these services. We didn't think that far, and the repercussions of what we're going to see. But and technical question answered later about the bond legislation. Does it have to mirror this legislation? And that I'll get an answer later. Thank you.
Councilman Schron.
Yes, and the reason we cannot wait until the two new councilmen come on board, because we're going to be floating these bonds in August or September. So we need to have a clear understanding from this body where we're going to be, how we're going to use the money when we go out and sell it. It's just like if you were to sell anything else, what is the customer buying? We need to have complete clarity from this body as to what we're doing. And part of the reason why it didn't get discussed, like Ms. Simon said, I've never seen something rush so fast in a 3-day period of time where we spent over $1 billion. And that's part of the reason why. It was done because, sadly, you were a replacement for a candidate that they thought they had their 6th vote. Let's be real candid.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With that, our next piece of legislation we are going to hold, and I know there are people here for this one, but our time is truly spent. So the Chapter 501 for the Cuyahoga County Code, we will bring back on our next agenda item. So, Madam Clerk, we'll move on. And now we will go to executive session.
Executive session now.
All meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. Yes, we are. During executive session, council confers outside of the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters and pending or imminent court action. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not specifically needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent committee room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session has ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters and pending or imminent court action? It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Will the clerk now call the roll on the motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Absolutely.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron? Ms. Conwell? Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Council President Jones?
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, the ayes have it. We will adjourn the meeting for executive session. Back on the record. Our executive session has ended. Is there any miscellaneous business? If not, all right, we will take a 5-minute recess to allow our clerk to take care of our IT business, and then we will begin our meeting at about 5:30.